everybody. It's Dave here. Darren is back. He's over there with his Viking sombrero. Hey, today we've got a show for you. We are talking controversies in different spots, but we're going to start off with the Vikings report card. Yes, they graded great again. Now, let's see if they can translate off the field to on the field, which brings us to this week in Vikings land, where the main topic will be Keith Carter. Who's Keith Carter? He is an offensive line coach / running backs coordinator that Kevin O'Connell hired just about a week ago. Well, there seems to be a little bit of controversy that's been stirred up since. We're going to address that. We've got a couple more items in this week's Vikings Land news bit, and then we're going to follow up with a position review. Which position? It's my favorite, baby. It's the big round bellies. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Cool. It didn't transition. Come on. Okay. There we go. Wrong one. I know why. And give me a second. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, no. This is previous. We got problems. Slideshow. Here we go. All right.
Oh,
I was worried I lost my scene there. Not good. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for showing up today. We have Disgusted Act. We have Norsefius, of course, and he is cooking. What you cooking, Norsefius? You're going to make me hungry. Aaron's here. Hey there, buddy. What beautiful weather we are having, aren't we? So, Darren, you spent last week playing hooky.
I did.
Where were you and what were you doing?
I was in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and I was doing as little as possible. That's pretty much, other than buying this custom-made Minnesota Vikings sombrero hat from some beachside vendor. So that was one of my main purchases, along with a little bit of tequila. And getting a slight tan, which is quickly disappearing, but good time. Puerto Vallarta is a very busy place, which some people on this chat might know about because it's a pretty popular place for people from several nations, including the U.S., to visit and get in some sun, particularly if you're in one of the colder states.
Yes, like Minnesota. And North Dakota and South Dakota and all those.
I actually met a couple from Minnesota. My wife was talking to them, and she said, "Oh, my husband's a big Viking fan." And so they made a point to come over and say hi and ask how I became a Vikings fan. So I gave them that old spiel, too, about the, Bud Grant and blah, 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 blah. So it was pretty funny.
Hey, works for me. As you can see, we have Carter Chaos, Vikings O-line savior or sinner. We will get into that in theme 2. But now we're going to start with theme 1. And boom. Oops. Come on. Here we go. The one I wanted. There we go. The report card. Boy, I seem to be a little bit rusty. We didn't have enough shows this week. I apologize.
Yeah. Yes, wanted to discuss, Dave, about the NFL Players Association team report card, which came out this week. The Vikings finished. This is their the NFLPA's third annual report card. They put out the first one after the 2020 in the 2023 off season, and the Vikings ranked very, very high. Once again, finished second overall behind the Miami Dolphins, which is the same order as last year. Miami was first. The Vikings were second. The first report card, folks might remember that the Vikings finished first overall in the NFL PA's team report card. And I'm not going to get into and this is a pretty extensive survey, Dave. There's 1,600 NFL players who answer the survey questions and give their team grades on a whole bunch of range of categories about the work environments that they toil under while they're plying their trade yearly. So the data that the NFLPA is getting here is pretty good. It's a lot of players and a lot of opinions. So I think it's what you see here is very valuable, and it reflects, I think, pretty accurate assessment of where teams are at with the work environment. And I'm not
why I picked this slide that shows the division and not the league. I'll have a later one that shows the whole league.
Mm-hmm.
Notice Green Bay and their grade on ownership. They're owned by their fans, and their fans don't give each other an A+.
Little dig there from old Davey.
Yeah, I just had to include that. So, anyways,
yeah.
Well, let's start off with families.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm not going to get into in this segment about like how this may impact the Vikings' chances of bringing in free agents this year, because we've covered that topic before, and we obviously think that it's going to help the Vikings. But it does. I think this team report, Dave, is yet another example of, in my opinion, the excellent owners that Mark and Zygi Wilf are for the Minnesota Vikings, because you got the team report where the Vikings had outstanding grades from a whole bunch of categories, from how they treat families to the training facilities to team travel to even the coaches and the coaches that they have, as well as food options and also, there's 11 categories. The Vikings had excellent marks. They had 3 A+, 3 A's, 3 A-, and their lowest ranking was a B+, which was in the dietitian nutrition part of things. Now, Dave, I don't know about your school days, but if in my high school and university career, if the worst grade that I got in a year was a B+, I would have been like over the moon. So again, the team report that shows the Vikings, Mark and Zygi Wilf, they've just done an excellent job on the off the field stuff. And it's not just there. You look at recently they finished first in game day experience with the NFL's Voice of the Fans survey. And there was a whole bunch of other categories where they were top 1, 2, top 5 in the league. Parking, game entertainment, a whole bunch of things where the Vikings under the Wilfs are top of the line. And then recently as well, it was back in January, ESPN surveyed 111 NFL players, and they determined that the US Bank Stadium is the third toughest place to play in the NFL, according to these players that were surveyed. And a lot of the stuff that the Vikings are doing with game day experience ties into that, the SKOL chant and the different sort of the music they put in and all the different entertainment they've got going on with the fans, and the fact that the fans are so juiced up at these games and entertained that they stay nice and loud. So, it just goes to show those three examples there, Dave, I think show that the Vikings under American Zygi Wilf are a world-class sports organization, not just in the NFL, but in all sports you could pick out, because they're off the field stuff. Very impressive. And for Vikings fans who have a long memory, Dave, like you and I, we know that it wasn't always like this. Like the Wilfs are right now coming on. May will be the 20th anniversary of them buying the team from Red McCombs. And you and I can remember, Dave, and lots of people on this will also remember that Red McCombs in the early 2000s, he was planning on selling the team. He hadn't been successful in getting a new stadium built in Minneapolis, and he just wasn't investing in the Vikings at all. The Vikings had like the fewest coaching staff in the NFL by the time Mike Tice was the head coach. He had guys who were offensive line coach and offensive coordinator. They had to bundle positions. The Metrodome was pretty much a dump, very outdated. They weren't investing any money in that. So when the Wilfs bought the team, they built up all of that stuff, and they've done away with a lot of that old stuff. And again, made this a world-class organization. They got US Bank Stadium built, not all of their money, but they got it built. They've, as I said, they've invested in the staff and the time and the effort to have, make, when you go to the US Bank Stadium, you're getting, top of the line, best in class in arriving there. When you get there, the food is great. There's stuff going on during the game besides the game to keep you entertained. Just people are enjoying getting a world-class, first-class experience when they go to the Vikings games at the US Bank Stadium. And then the Wilfs have built state-of-the-art training facility in Eagan with, the top-of-the-line weight room, training staff, hot tub, cold tub, locker room space, all of that stuff. And again, that wasn't the case under previous Viking owners. So when you get to, again, off the field stuff, the Vikings under American Zygi Wilf have built a world-class, top-of-the-line sports organization. And that's why I get pretty annoyed when I see some fans complain about the Wilfs not being good owners. I don't know how you could complain about that, considering what they've done to transform the off-the-field stuff that the Vikings do and have. I think the thing that, on the flip side of that, though, while the Vikings are clearly off the field are world class, they haven't quite gotten to world class on the field, I think. If you look at it, since 2005, when the Wilfs bought the team, Dave, the Vikings have 175 wins, 147 losses, and 2 ties overall record. Now, that's 11th best in the NFL, which is good, but it's not great. I wouldn't say it's world class. They haven't been to a Super Bowl. They haven't won a Super Bowl. They haven't been to a Super Bowl yet. So I think, that's where the Vikings need to get to be considered world class on the field. And I think a big reason why that has happened is that the Wilfs, particularly early on, didn't make the best hires at head coach and in the front office. So particularly, Brad Childress was a very bad choice for their first hire as head coach. We all know that. And then their choice for Fran Foley, who was kind of the de facto GM for a couple of months anyway, until they found out his resume had been fudged heavily, that was clearly a bust of a signing. Rick Spielman, not disastrous as your general manager, but the Vikings were average, overall, middle of the road with him. A few great years, some low years, nothing to write home about. Leslie Frazier was not a good choice as a successor to Brad Childress. That wasn't a great hire. Now, the good news is that I think the Wilfs, as they've matured as sports owners, learn from their mistakes, that they're getting better at the hiring of general managers and head coaches, I think. Mike Zimmer, yes, we have complained about him a lot in recent years about the end of his tenure, but for the first 5 years, he was a pretty damn good hire as a head coach for the Vikings. He turned the franchise on the field around. And then clearly Kevin O'Connell looks like a home run hire as head coach so far. the NFLPA team report, he got an A+ as a head coach, one of only 3 to do that, and that's what he got an A+ last year. He's consistently been ranked one of the best head coaches by the players who play under him in the NFL. And then Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I think, has done a pretty good job in his 3 years as head coach, addressing the salary cap, hitting a lot of home runs in free agency. The draft, that has not gone well, but like I said a couple of weeks ago, I think the Vikings are in a better place right now, organizationally, on the field and off the field with him as GM, than they were when he inherited it from Rick Spielman in 2025. So I think with the way things are going with Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, particularly if we can drastically improve on the drafting, that the Vikings are getting to a place, they do have the leadership at head coach and the front office where I feel very positive about that the Vikings can get to be a world-class organization on the field in the not too distant future.
I agree completely. I think they can. I think they're on the way. We will see. Now, the fact that we grade so well, and reports came out this week that a whole bunch of agents and a whole bunch of players speak so highly of Minnesota and what they've done, and that players are saying, hey, that place is great. I want to go there. It's going to help get free agents up there, and to have what are the number one things that players want? They want their families taken care of. They want good food, and it just barely got a B+ from an A, and it was. They've got a huge selection. You see the reporters that go through the cafeteria, and other people are like, wow, it's great. We got the Blue Line area, which is all foods from areas in the world where people are centurions, live to over 100. We have virtually everything you could ask for. And they said it wasn't quite as fresh as we'd like. And I bet that was the seafood lovers that weren't getting that fresh seafood, because there is no fresh seafood up in Minnesota. It has to be flown in. So
unless you get some walleye from the lakes or
you get
bass.
some walleye, which would be awesome. But they're not getting the crawfish fry and stuff like that. So because all that stuff would have to be shipped up. But I don't know. Versus Miami. Miami got an A or an A+ on theirs. It was I gotta look. Bring it back up. They got a lot. They got an A on their nutrition stuff. But Miami, when they built their new facility, built it off of the Vikings. The Vikings set the stage. And now they are keeping everything up to speed. And the owners, Mark and Zygi and Lenny, are keep investing money and more money into the facilities, whether it be TCO and Egan or U.S. Bank. Like we had on a couple weeks ago, the Vikings guy, and he said they're installing 6G Wi-Fi in U.S. Bank Stadium. And the Wilfs are paying for it. Not the community, the Wilfs. And I think that's cool. They're great owners. They're not afraid to spend money. Every time any GM, whether it be Spielman or Kwesi, have come up and said, hey, we want to sign this guy and he's got a such and such, bonus to be paid right now, they pony up. Without qualm. They pony up. Not all teams do that. And that's a big plus for Minnesota. Now, let's hope this world-class facilities and owners can turn it into on the field world-class product and not just good but not great. Let's make it great. All right. Now on to, Dean says, and the Wilfs buying tickets of the away games is classy too. Yes, exactly. All right. On to theme 2. And here we go. Boy, I'm rusty today.
You'll get it back. You'll get the mojo back, Dave.
Hold on. Bing, 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 bing. This week in Vikings land. There we go.
Yes. A little bit of different graphic there, Dave. Like it. But yes, the wanted to few topics that, I mean, first thing, this was a busy week, Dave, for the NFL, of course, the combine. There's a ton of shit that we're not even going to be able to get to today with the Vikings and NFL related that impacts the Vikings. But one of the things that the first thing I want to get at, it was the head promo for the show, is I want to say, normally, Dave, I can't remember any time on this show that you or I have highlighted or had a specific segment about the Vikings hiring an assistant positional coach, or
we
even
may talk a position coach, like we did Chris Cooper years ago, but we didn't talk his assistant.
Yes, but this week the Vikings hired former Jets offensive line coach and run game coordinator Keith Carter. And the Vikings hiring him did pique my interest. One, because we saw what happened to the Vikings in Detroit and Los Angeles in the last 2 games, particularly on the interior. But it wasn't just the interior; it was all over the place, from tackle to guard to center in those 2 games, and getting overpowered and overmatched, and weren't ready for the moment, didn't look prepared. That doesn't reflect well on the players, but it also doesn't reflect well on the guy who's their coach, Chris Cooper. And we know that the Vikings have, particularly Kevin O'Connell had said that we got to get better on the interior. He said that flat out in the press conference after that game. And so this hiring of Carter piqued my interest because I'm thinking, is this a guy? It's interesting because Carter actually has more experience as the top, the guy as the offensive line coach than Cooper does. So, but yet you're bringing in Carter as the assistant to Cooper. Well, is Kevin O'Connell hiring this guy because he wants to have somebody on staff that he can hire in-house in case the Vikings don't take a step forward on the offensive line in 2025 under Cooper? So that's one thing that interests me about the Carter hire. But as the week went on and writers that cover the team started digging into Carter a little bit more, things got even more interesting because Carter's been billed right off the get-go. He was billed aggressive, old-school coach, kind of a Tony Sperano kind of guy. Gruff. He's a yeller. He's a screamer. And he likes tough, physical, long practices for the offensive line. Well, that is certainly a coaching style that that's been pretty synonymous with football over the years, but that coaching style has rubbed a lot of, it seems like quite a few of his ex-players the wrong way. Taylor Lewin from the Titans star left tackle. Carter was the offensive line coach and run game coordinator under Mike Vrabel for all of his 5 seasons as head coach in Tennessee. So Lewin knows Carter very well, and I think he called him an asshole at one point, and also was had been very critical of Carter over the years, particularly on social media. Well, there was Lewin. Then we saw that Mekhi Becton and Breece Allen, who played under Carter with the Jets, they both seemed to agree with Lewin's criticisms on social media, although Allen ended up deleting some of those. The guy you had up there, DeMarco, the fullback from Atlanta, who played under Carter with the Falcons in 2016, he didn't like Carter. He said something to the effect of Carter was not anybody's favorite coach, and I'm quite confident in saying that. Pretty strong words there. And there's been several other players as well that have been critical of Carter's coaching style, did not like him, it seemed personally or professionally. And to me, that's Dave, that seems like a pretty, for Kevin O'Connell, who just got an A+ in as the one of from his players with as a very player friendly head coach who listens to them, uses their time efficiently, takes what they say into account and acts upon it. This seems like bringing in a guy like Carter, who we now have several players on the record who seem to despise him. This seems like a pretty risky hire because his staff, we don't see the staff interact with the players all the time, Dave. Usually the only time we see it is those team videos that the Vikings show after the game, and all that's positive, rah stuff. I don't think Brian Flores is as touchy and feely on the field, in practices that we don't see. But still, this seems like a pretty player-friendly coaching staff that Kevin O'Connell has assembled over his 3 years. Carter seems kind of the opposite of that, very old school. And how is that going to jibe with the Vikings, considering that, again, Kevin O'Connell has received a lot of praise in that area? The other thing is looking at bringing Carter in is, has his offensive lines that he's been in charge of, Dave, has he really made them better when he's been in there? In which case, that's something that I think you got to look at. And I'm just going to take a look at my notes here. But looking at the 5 years with the Titans, yes, the team finished in the top 6 in total rushing yards for those 5 years. So that's good. But they also had Derrick Henry, one of the all-time greats the whole time. And their offense was one of the most run-heavy in the NFL under Vrabel. So that means you're always going to have a lot of rushing attempts, and that means a lot of volume yardage. But that doesn't mean your team is efficient and good at running the ball. So that's one thing about it. And the other thing is the running game isn't the only part of coaching the offensive line. Pass blocking is the other part of it. And the Vikings passed a lot under KOC. We know that. So in 4 of the 5 seasons, the Titans as Titans offensive line coach, despite consistently being in the mid-20s or lower as far as pass attempts, Tennessee quarterbacks are sacked, checking Pro Football Reference, 47 or more times in 4 of those 5 seasons. That is quite a lot. And I think those total rushing yards and sacks, they don't get any better in Carter's 2 seasons as an offensive line coach and run game coordinator with the Jets. 2023, the Jets finished 22nd in total rushing yards. They were 30th in passing yards, and they gave up 64 sacks. Last year, the Jets were 16th in passing yards overall, but 31st in rushing yards. And Aaron Rodgers got sacked 40 times. Now, with the Jets, there's certainly circumstances that made Carter's job tougher, much tougher in New York than Tennessee. Rodgers was done after the first series in the first game with the Jets, and they had a lot of injuries on the offensive line, particularly in 2023. But still, pretty poor performance by the Jets' offensive line under Carter makes me wonder. And then, but we know, Dave, we talked about this. The folks on here have talked about this too, about watching those 2 games against Detroit and the Rams. The Vikings interior particularly, not very physical, can't move people, kind of soft, right? Carter is a guy who Kevin O'Connell believes his aggressive, gritty coaching style might be an ingredient that can help overcome that. Give the Vikings interior, however that's going to be made out, and we'll get to that a little bit later, can be a way to be an added ingredient that can create some improvement and create a new attitude and play style that will be better than what we had. Again, I feel it's pretty risky. I don't know if that's the case, but Carter isn't the head offensive line coach for one thing, but also I got to give it to KOC. He's been right a lot more than he's been wrong as the Vikings head coach. And so maybe he's right in this case too in hiring Carter. As you like to say, Dave, we'll see. But I think you like this hire.
I do like this hire very much. Now, there's multiple reasons. One, yes, he's got a reputation of being a hard ass. Okay, we've had coaches that way before. Some players respond that way. I like to think that linemen in particular like that style of coaching. Now, he's got to learn to say hello to those linemen in the hallway. I'll give him that. And now, hopefully, under KOC, he can knock off those rough edges. Maybe this is a reclamation project on his career.
Mm-hmm.
You have defensive coordinator Brian Flores, who's known to be a little rough around the edges of the old school, persuasion. Well, maybe this will help. Now, you talked about those sack numbers, and those sack numbers are valid. But sacks are also caused by the quarterback.
True.
Now, when it comes to the Titans in those years, we had all but one were by Tannehill. Tannehill, quality quarterback, but is known to hold the ball long. When it comes to the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, obviously Hall of Famer, but is getting washed and held on. The biggest complaint I heard out of New York is he's holding the ball too long. Well, if you hold the ball too long, like Sam Darnold in the Rams and the Detroit game, what happens? You get creamed. Now, it's hard to say. I looked at the PFF stats on those, and while Carter was at the Titans, the O-line, running backs, and wide receivers, on the rare case they were doing pass blocking, accounted for, and this goes from 2018 to 2022 sequentially, 23 sacks, 37 sacks, 18 sacks, 42 sacks, and David Quisenberry in that year had 11 of them, and 33 sacks. All the rest went to the quarterback. So if I can have an O-line and running backs get 23 or 37, only give up that in a year, we've had a fantastic year on the O-line if that's the case. Now, can he translate that? Or 18 that one year? And he did make Pro Bowl as a Pro Bowl coach. Was selected to that. So if he could get us to there and a couple of players don't like his manners, hey, I'll take the productivity because we have one goal. Let's win a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And if that helps do that, and it hurts a couple feelings along the way, so be it. Right? Toughen up, cupcake is basically it. Now, with the Jets, he wasn't as good with the Jets, but still, again, and the PFF blocking numbers, they were less than what you stated. He had 50 for the Jets. 2023 shows pass blocking attributed to 50 sacks, which is horrible. Now, that year, everybody and their brother got injured, including Aaron Rodgers, but everybody and their brother got injured. And then 12 of those went to Mekhi Blackmon alone.
Becton,
pardon me. Mekhi Becton.
I know you're thinking of Mekhi Blackmon.
Mekhi Becton alone. And Becton is one of those on the list that we'd love to have. But Becton is one of those that's complained. Oh, he's a hard ass. I don't like him. Well, you gave up 12 sacks. You got fired. You went to Philly. Philly, you have, exploded and done well. Obviously winning a Super Bowl, being a contributing part. But did it make you better? I'd like to ask him that. But I'm sure he's no. But the O-line coach is there to make it work. Now, one of the other things I like about this, he's a run game coordinator. Our present run game coordinator is our running back coach.
Curtis Modkins.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with Curtis. But you need somebody in the O-line room to coordinate that because the O-line coaches know what the O-linemen can do. or what they're being asked to do and how to train that. I think this is an opportunity for Carter to, one, soften up and get to the warm, touchy-feely, oh, it's great, kumbaya stuff under Kevin O'Connell, which is great. Stroke their egos, do whatever. How to best motivate somebody is basically what it is. Whether it be by coddling or by yelling and screaming, either one works if it's with the right person. Now, you got to pick. That's why leadership, you use different styles with different people most of the time because you get more out of it. Well, maybe he's learning that. That's just cool. But he's going to add that extra go-between of, hey, you want us to do what on the run? You want us, obviously, to improve the running game. So to do that, I need the guys to block this way. You're calling this play, let's block this way. Let's teach it this way. And Cooper's still going to have the say, obviously, over him because he's boss. But we'll see if things improve. Because one of the things Kevin O'Connell didn't like was the running game. Well, I've been calling for months for Chris Cooper's head. Well, maybe this is a reprieve, and he's there to help Cooper, to Modkins, and the whole team. And I think it's a great hire if that's the way it works out, because we need it. And so we will see once we get into the season if it helps, or once we get into training camp even. Scottish Bear says, don't touch Becton. He's had issues, and with weight and effort, he's one decent year pay me year. Oh, he's had one decent year. Yes. Now, Scottish Bear, obviously a Bears fan. Love him. He's one of our greatest fans as well. The Bears are in the same spot as half the teams in the league. They're looking to improve their offensive lines, and we'll get into the offensive line breakdown here in Theme 3. But, yes, one good year, and he's wanting to be paid. Is he on our list? Yes. Is he likely to, now that we have Keith Carter coming or under contract? I doubt it. But we will see. Money talks.
It does.
Remember who it was that went to play with Dallas under Zimmer after calling him all sorts of names up here?
Mr. Kendricks.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just money. They buried the hatchet, and he wanted to play for him. Why? Because he brought out the best in him. Hopefully, Keith Carter will bring out the best in our O-linemen, along with Chris Cooper, and things will go swimmingly as we work our way to the Super Bowl.
Want to recognize Tony the Machine Bell is on the comment section here, one of our Gallahorn Facebook friends. So welcome, Tony, because Tony's not a regular here, but he stopped in from time to time, and he stopped in today. So
and
thanks.
He's also a former round belly, and we like talking linemen. So I think it's a good hire. We're going to see overall. Do you think KOC is going to risk his rating? I think he's going to fix things, and that's exactly what fans want, is to fix the O-line situation, or at least attempt it.
Yes.
So that brings us to the next segment of the combine being in full swing.
Yeah, with the combine happening in Indy this week, of course, that ramps up the talk about free agency, but the draft in particular. And one of the things that's always interesting, Dave, is to see then this is when word starts leaking out about who teams have visited amongst the draft prospects. And I think that helps me actually at least narrow down to some extent who the heck the Vikings are interested in and who they might draft. Because every year, several of the guys that we hear from their top 30 visits or meeting at the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl or the Combine, they end up drafting some of these guys. And so it's important to keep those names in mind. And so far, I just want to mention, it's still pretty low yet, but I think I counted 8 names so far that I've seen from various writers, people that have been confirmed that the Vikings met with at the Combine. And they included 3 defensive linemen and a couple of cornerbacks. One here, Trey Amos from Ole Miss, Dorian Strong from Virginia Tech, was also interviewed by the Vikings. Mm-hmm. He had 3 defensive linemen as well. Derek Harmon from Oregon, Darius Alexander from Toledo, he's right there, as well as Cam Jackson from Florida. 1 offensive lineman, Dave, Luca Kandra from Cincinnati. Luke Kandra from Cincinnati. They also have interviewed Ashton Jeanty from Boise State, the running back, the all-world running back. Mm-hmm. And then they, surprisingly, they also, I read this morning, they had interviewed Cam Ward, the quarterback from Miami, who's expected to go in the first round at some point in time. So, those names
earlier in the week, Shedeur Sanders was seen with 3 hats on his backpack, and one of them was a Minnesota Vikings hat. And people are like, Minnesota Vikings are interested?
Yeah. No. What's up with that?
It's KOC checking out quarterbacks that he may have to face. That's all that is. Or that he may have to stick in the reclamation project here in 4 or 5 years. That's it. He gathers quarterbacks like women in the 80s gathered beanie dolls, beanie bears, whatever.
Most of those guys on that mentioned that we've mentioned, Dave, they all play positions that the Vikings have needs in. Defensive line in particular, offensive line with Kandra, running back with Jeanty, the cornerbacks with Amos and Strong. And Kevin O'Connell said this week when he was talking to Paul Allen and Pete Burchich at the Combine, he said that the Vikings right off the bat had met with a group of defensive linemen. Now we don't know whether it was just those 3 or it was 30, but they met with defensive linemen. He specifically mentioned that. So this is clearly an area the Vikings are looking at in the draft and looking at the prospects and taking a long look at them, which makes sense because this is a deep defensive line class. But So the cornerbacks, the cornerbacks and the defensive linemen makes a lot of sense. Even the offensive linemen, Kandra's looked at from Cincinnati. He's looked like kind of a day 3 guy, might not even get drafted, so he'd be a developmental guy. The Harmon you've seen mocked to the Viking. I've seen him mocked to the Vikings a whole bunch of times. Alexander's a guy who he's probably going to be there 24, but he had a very strong Senior Bowl, and depending on the Combine, and he might go higher than that. He might be there, he might be not. Jackson is more of a day 3 guy, kind of a run stuffer, and he might. If the Vikings are going to pick him, he wouldn't be in the first round, but he's a late day 3, 5th rounder, kind of 6th rounder kind of guy. But what about Jeanty, Dave, or Cam Ward? Like, those were interesting interviews, like you said. Jeanty, sure, the Vikings have a need there, but I think he's going to be long gone before 24. So why would you interview him? Well, one thing is, 1 or 2 guys always drop for whatever reason in the draft lower than they're expected to. Most people have Jeanty going to the Cowboys at 12. But if he's there at 24, the Vikings would have to think very seriously about selecting him. So you do your due diligence and you talk to this guy and see what he's about. Same now, Ward, we're not looking for quarterbacks, but like you said, KOC is always mining information from the quarterbacks because, maybe somewhere down the future, we're not going to draft Cam Ward, but maybe some 2, 3, 4 years down the line, if Ward doesn't work out wherever he's played, the Vikings O'Connell might bring him in as a backup, just like they did to Daniel Jones. But Tyler Forness also mentioned this, I think it was last year, about some of these visits. And for the Vikings, sometimes they're looking to get information on other draft prospects, teammates of Gentil or Ward. And, I was just kind of looking at Boise State and Miami. Well, Miami's got Damian Martinez, a running back who might go in the second round, third round, fourth round. The Vikings need a running back, a rookie running back. So maybe they're interested in getting some information about what kind of teammate Ward thinks Martinez was. Same thing with Boise State. They don't have a lot of draft prospects this time, but one they do have is Ed Rusher, Ahmad Hassanin. And he's an interesting story, was born in Egypt, didn't play football until very late in his high school career, but he's come on. The last 2 years, he's had 21 sacks total. This last year, he had the most pressures, I think, of any defensive edge rusher, defensive end in college football. Despite that, he's only looked as a day 3 guy. And the Vikings don't really have a need at edge, I think, but still, he's a day 3 guy. He might get drafted in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, or he might not. Last year, Gabe Murphy was supposed to be drafted in the 4th or 5th round. Didn't get drafted at all because of his short arms, and the Vikings signed him as an undrafted rookie free agent, and now Murphy next year might have a large role as an edge rusher. Again, interviewing Gentil, you might get some intel on Hassanin, and the Vikings might end up drafting him with one of their 5th rounders because they feel he's the best player available, or he might not get drafted at all, and we sign him, and he adds some depth to the edge rusher room. So these interviews, you always got to pay attention to them, not just because of the guy that they're interviewing, but also some of the players and teammates that might get drafted who are teammates of the guys that we're interviewing. So, but just an interesting time to see who the Vikings are talking to them and trying to read the tea leaves and figure out why they're talking to them.
I think it's normal operations. This is what they do. And I agree with you on they bring some people in and it may be asking questions about other people there maybe have their eye on that they want to look. So we'll see. And Gentil, I don't expect him to get to 24. If he gets close to it, the Vikings need to snatch him. But we'll see. We will see.
We certainly will.
And Delton, I talk to Mary almost every day. She's still around, thankfully. That brings us to the next topic.
And final topic. Just want to talk about want to talk about the salary cap, which the NFL announced is going to be 27. You got it up there, 279.2 million in 2025, which is a $23.8 million increase compared to last year. This Jason Fitzgerald, who's the founder of the Over the Cap website, which all football fans, serious football fans, consult regularly to check out salary cap information and contract information in the NFL. He said that he wrote a post about this week, and he said that number was much higher than just about every executive that he talked to. They were surprised it jumped that much. Fitzgerald also said that this isn't going to really help anybody in a lot of cases. It just adds to what you already had or didn't have to spend. He did feel it would help the teams that are in very poor cap shape more because it helps get them a little bit closer to out of the red as far as their salary cap situation. But for the Vikings, they have $23.8 million more to spend than they did a week ago, but so does every other team. So it doesn't really increase their buying power. But I think one thing that Matthew Collar mentioned when he was talking about the salary cap this week, which I thought was a good point, was that while it doesn't help them, the Vikings, anymore per se, perhaps one benefit of this is that that extra cash, the fact that the salary cap went up so much this year and it's going to go up again in 2026, and maybe not as much as 23.8 million, but it'll go up maybe 15, 16 million, and it's going to go up again in 2027. But that this jump might make teams like the Vikings feel less concerned about signing like a very like a high-priced free agent to a high-priced deal, because that deal in 2 years from now, with the salary cap going up and up and up, will seem like a bargain compared to what you'll be signing for people in 2027. And the Vikings have a bunch of free agents right now, but in a couple of years' time, maybe they won't have those big needs and the need to sign and maybe they won't have to sign as many free agents to bigger price deals. So that's one benefit of the salary cap going up to the Vikings. It might make Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the front office a little bit more open to signing somebody to a bigger deal than they've had the appetite for in the past. I think it also gives them some extra money and might make them feel more comfortable about signing some of their own in-house free agents like Cam Bynum or Byron Murphy Jr. or Aaron Jones, who I think the Vikings all would love to have back, but they might not have loved to have them back at the price that they might go for on the open market. But now that you've got, again, almost $24 million extra, you've got a little bit more to play with. You know you're going to get more in the next salary cap. Again, they might be more open to signing those guys, particularly Bynum and Murphy Jr., to the deals that they're looking for, which I think would be higher than the Vikings normally are comfortable with.
I agree. And Kansas City does the same thing. They now have the extra $24 million, and guess who they tagged?
Yes, that's right. And I don't think I think that the salary cap going up where it did, made them comfortable that they could make that work for 1 year at least, and then see and then they can take the year to work on an extension beyond that. But so there's that one. In this case, was a downer for the Vikings that Smith is off the market. But that's partly what I think the salary cap did for the Chiefs in particular. It made it doable financially for them to tag Smith and see what they can work on beyond that.
Right. And I got the numbers for the guards or the offensive linemen. It's in the 20s, low 20s millions per, and they're going to pay it. Hey, everybody's saying that the cap, went up greater than they thought. Well, it's going to go even bigger here in a couple of years. Why? In 3 years, you have all the new TV contracts will be starting to roll in, and the gambling stuff. And probably more importantly, they're starting to measure the TV audience differently starting, I think, this year. The Nielsen report, which was always been the gold standard for TV viewers and viewership, is changing to realize that not everybody watches broadcast TV anymore. They stream it. So they're starting to get numbers from your TVs, right? Your smart TVs. They're going to know, hey, he just watched the game on YouTube Sunday Ticket. Right? He streamed it, or he watched it on Amazon Prime. And all those numbers are now going to be included, which is going to raise ad revenues and is going to raise the contracts, the network contracts, which will raise the cap even more. So a contract this year that may seem expensive, when you get 3 years down the road, you may go, oh, that was a great price. And for a Vikings example, I give you Christian Darrisaw, who we got a year early. And everybody's like, oh, why would you pay him? Hey, here, 2 years, it's going to seem like a bargain. So that's why.
And we said that on the show at the time that he signed the contract extension.
Yes, we did. You did.
It was smart for the Vikings to do this for exactly those reasons. Well, and also you keep a key player happy because you've just given him a boatload of money.
Yes. Made him feel special. It's not about the money. It's about what the money
represents.
Represents, yes, to steal a Kirk Cousins phrase. All right. Now on to my favorite theme of the week, theme 3. the O-line.
The big round belly is going to continue with our positional analysis this week. And we're only like the legal tampering for free agency starts Monday, March the 10th. So we've got this show and the next show to do the rest of the positional analysis. So next week's going to be like, we're going to go through the whole defense in one show. But just going to deal with the offensive line today, Dave. Look, it's a unit that I think, we know it's set at the tackle spots, but it certainly needs upgrades on the interior. And there is some work to do on the depth side too. Now, the fact that the interior of the offensive line needs to be addressed was made pretty clear by KOC after getting blown out in the wildcard game against the Rams, when he said, we've got to find a way to solidify the interior of the pocket. And then he's said similar quotes when asked about it since then. So it sure sounds to me, Dave, like the Vikings aren't going to be maintaining the status quo at right guard, potentially at center, and at left guard in 2025. But, let's get the tackles out of the way first. Brian O'Neill, you know what you have there. He's excellent, and if he's healthy, you've got an all-pro level play at right tackle. Same goes for left tackle, Chris Darrisaw. Now, the only issue with Darrisaw is that he's recovering from that tearing his ACL and his MCL. That happened on October 25th of last year. O'Connell said this week at the Combine that his recovery is going great, but Dave, that injury, we talked about it with TJ Hawkinson, typically takes 8 to 9 months, best case scenario to get more or less
Up
full
to a
recovery.
year, but yeah, okay.
And I've seen 6 to 12 months for regular humans. But so by my count, Darrisaw might be ready to play football by late July, or late July and late August,
time of training camp.
Yeah. Now, last year, TJ Hawkinson was recovering from a similar injury. As we know, he sustained that on Christmas Eve of 2023. And then he returned to play on November 3rd of 2024. So it took him roughly 10 and a half months to recover well enough that the Vikings were confident enough to put him on the field to play in an NFL game. So I think this does bring question whether Darrisaw will be ready to play right off the bat at the season opener in September. Seems a little iffy to me that if he'll be able to do that, but once he is back, you don't have to worry about him either. You've got an all-pro level type play there. Not the case at right guard, center, or left guard, as we know. And they've got to bring in if they got to bring some new guys, and I think they do, Dave, do they use the draft or free agency to mostly attack that? And you always say, Dave, that taking an offensive lineman out of college, what is it, 3 years, maybe
4 years to make the transition.
Yeah, before they hit their
out whether he's good enough.
Yeah. So if that's the case, I don't think the Vikings can't wait 3 years to find out if the guy they drafted at guard or center is good. They need major
improvements.
improvement.
You get a blue chipper. That's the only exception to that.
True. They need major improvements right now. And I think anyway, that means you look to free agency as the way to fill those spots. And talking about Trey Smith earlier, the Chiefs slapping the franchise tag on him is a bummer for the Vikings. I would have advocated for the Vikings to make a strong push to sign him, even though, he would have cost over $20 million per year. But he's off the market. We talked about Mekhi Blackman.
Whoa. Is he off the market?
I
Are
feel
the Chiefs trying to do a tag and trade deal like the Vikings reportedly were trying to do with Sam Darnold, but news is coming out before the show started that may not be the case. But anyways, besides the point that they're trying to do a tag and trade, would somebody give the Chiefs a third or a second rounder to have negotiating rights prior? I don't think the Vikings will. We don't have it to give up. But
and I think that's what I guess off the market. I mean for the Vikings, because they are not trading for Trey Smith with the draft capital that they have. I think that whether somebody else gets him, I do care if he would land in the NFC North, but the fact that we can't get him means he's off the market to me. I guess that's what I'm getting at. And that's what I'm most concerned about, is the Vikings improving the interior, and we aren't going to have a shot at Trey Smith to do so.
Right. He's off our market.
He's off our market. Mekhi Becton, I think I called him Blackman before you jumped in there too. But Becton, I think, with Keith Carter being brought on as the offensive line coach, he might be off the market for the Vikings too, because he's not going to play for a team that has just hired a coach he does not like. Although you said money talks, right? So,
that's right. But one of our viewers, and I'm trying to remember who it was, said you don't pay him after only one good year, and he had only one good year. So we'll see. But
and
yes.
I would get a bit off topic, but I have the same concerns about Becton in that didn't look good with the Jets and looked pretty good with the Eagles, but he was playing with 4 good to excellent offensive linemen on that
around
line.
him.
So,
yes.
So was his jump in play because he took a few leaps and got a lot better, or was it the case of he just had a lot of good players around him who papered over his flaws and made him look better than he actually is?
Good question.
It's a question that your personnel department would have to solve. But again, if he's not interested in coming because Carter is there, then it just creates a lot of uncertainty for me if the Vikings have a legitimate shot at signing him with Keith Carter on board. But the Vikings would have known that when they hired Keith Carter too, I think. So maybe they weren't even interested in Becton.
They may have gotten insight on him and said, no, you want to take him off your list.
Mm-hmm. I do think that either way, Becton potentially and Smith certainly more than potentially being off the Vikings market does narrow the Vikings options and of who they are going to get. So, but if you are going to follow the free agent strategy the Vikings have done under Kwesi of signing guys coming off their rookie contracts, then I think they need to do what they can to sign either Tevin Jenkins from the Bears or Will Freeze from the Colts. They play opposite guard spots, Dave. Jenkins was at left guard with the Bears and Freeze is at right. But if you sign either one,
both guard spots.
We do. But I don't think you're going to sign both. But if you sign one of those, these are 2 of the best that are on the market right now, or potentially set to hit the market. Either one of them is healthy. When they're healthy, they're an upgrade over last year's starter, whether it's Breisner or Blake Brandel. And the PFF contract projections have Jenkins, I think, getting a contract of about $13.3 million per year average. Freeze would be about $14.3 million per average over multiple years. I think the market right now might dictate that those contract averages might even be more than that. But that'd be okay with me, and I think that it'd be okay with the Vikings if you could get one of these guys, can be a plug and play starter for 3 or 4 years and be upgrades over what you had in 2024. I'd also, of the Vikings, I'd be interested in making a run at James Daniels. He missed most of last season with the torn Achilles, and that's a concern, of course, but he had an excellent PFF grade of 93.3 before it happened. He's not a guy coming off a rookie contract like Freeze and Jenkins are, but his PFF grades since he joined the league in 2018 have always been pretty solid. And he'll only be 28 in September. So he's still young.
He's still young.
And he's still young in his prime, even though he's into it would be his 3rd NFL contract here. And he's got positional flexibility. He was a right guard last year with the Steelers, but he's played left guard when he was with the Bears. So, if you're looking to either replace Brandel or Reisner, who were right and left guard last year, he could do either. And I think because he was injured with the Achilles, he's going to be undervalued a bit. PFF thinks he's going to get just $5.5 million average for 1 year. And I think that's a nice price to get somebody like Daniels at for the Vikings. People might ask,
question is, when will he be ready?
That's true.
And how severe was the Achilles injury? Was it a slight tear where they could stitch it back up like they did with Brian O'Neill, or is it a complete separation? And we don't know the answer to that.
We don't. And every NFL team that's looking at him are going to be digging into the medicals on that, I think. But if you were to sign a Daniels and a Freeze, or a Jenkins and a Daniels, the question is, okay, what about left guard Blake Brandel, who is under contract and was your starter all last year? What happens to him? Where does that leave him? And I'd say, well, really, who cares? He was mostly terrible after Darrison went down with the injury. And so I think he should at least be made to earn a starting job in 2025 and bring in some competition for him. Now, offensive line, right? If you sign a couple of guards like Freeze, Jenkins, or Daniels, then I don't see them replacing all three on the interior, Dave. I think that's a bit too much. And if they sign those guards, then that means Garrett Bradbury, you're probably going to keep him there. And I know a lot of Vikings fans don't want that. I also know that Falcons center Drew Dahlman is projected to go on the market. Doesn't look that the Falcons can re-sign him, and that's interested a lot of Vikings fans who say swap Dahlman and release Bradbury. The thing to keep in mind, I think, is that the Vikings senior vice president of player personnel, Ryan Grigson, drafted Ryan Kelly in the first round in his last year as general manager with the Colts in 2016. Kelly's also set to hit the market. Older than Dahlman, and he's a year older than Bradbury, and he missed 7 games last year, but his PFF grade was 67. He had a pass blocking grade of 71.8. Bradbury's overall grade was 62.1, but the pass blocking grade was 48.2. So Gregson's a former offensive lineman. He saw what happened to Bradbury and the rest of the offensive line against the Lions and the Rams. I think if he's been backdoors making a strong case to Kwesi about Kelly, then it could be a sensible plan to release Bradbury, save a bit of cap space in 2025, and then you sign Kelly to like a 2-year deal with some void years thrown on it. Again, I don't expect
cheaper than Dahlman.
He would be cheaper than Dahlman because of his age. Might be some injury concerns there with him, but his track record throughout his career since 2016 has been certainly a much stronger player than Garrett Bradbury. And even now, it seems like he's a better player than Garrett Bradbury. So he'd be an upgrade if you put him in there, and he has a relationship with Grigson from the past. Grigson drafted
a lot of the way teams work is, do they have a relationship with the player?
Yeah.
Interesting.
The Vikings, like I said, I don't see them changing all three, the 2 guards and the centers compared to what they had last year. I think they either go 2 guards and keep Bradbury, or they sign 1 guard, sign a center like Kelly, and then they keep probably Brandel at left guard. That's how I see it. But not all 3, Reisner, Bradbury, and Brandel, all get replaced by new guys. I don't think the Vikings at the draft, would they spend a first rounder on someone like Alabama's Tyler Booker or Jackson from Ohio State? I guess at 24, I feel like you said, if you got a blue chipper there, like an elite guy that you really believe in, and you think he can go in as a rookie and be so much better than a free agent that you signed, then maybe the Vikings would consider that. I think it's more likely that if they can acquire more draft picks, trading out of 24 potentially, they might look at, again, picking a day 2 or day 3 guy at the offensive line. But I don't think they want any more failed Ed Ingram experiments.
Yeah, but by definition, you're not going to find a blue chipper at 24. Blue chippers are guys that are going to be Pro Bowlers right now. And they're usually top 1, 2, or 3. Right? The Hunter kid from Colorado that's playing corner and wide receiver may be a blue chipper.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it for this year's draft. Boom, done. There are no more. To find one, and especially at 24, they traditionally don't exist. Now, can you get lucky and find the unicorn every once in a while, stumble into the unicorn? Sure. That does happen every once in a while, but it is so rare. And if fans get, well, we got to get that guy. Well, yeah, I agree. We got to get that guy. But how do you find him? How out of, 100 years worth of drafting NFL football players that not every team finds them because they don't exist. And it's hard to find the ones, and a little bit of luck, just like the shape of the football and how it bounces, has to go your way. And so you pick the next best, the ones that project out to be, hey, this guy's going to be good, right? And then you develop them, and you hope that in the first year, he's not a disaster. You hope he's mediocre. Hey, for a rookie, that's fantastic. If he's better than that, you've got yourself a bargain. Now, do we want to find somebody that's better than that? You betcha we do. But the draft, like Delton says, is very much a crapshoot, and it's hard to find. Can you find them? Have they shown up? Yes. They've shown up as undrafted free agents. But it is so difficult to do if fans think that we're going to draft this guy and he's going to be a stud. Most likely, sorry, but no, that isn't the case in his rookie year. That's why we're talking about fixing the O-line with free agents that are mostly coming off their first contract because that's what Kwesi likes and it's the smart way to go. However, we could take one of the old timers, Zeitler, put him in for a 1-year Band-Aid. But we're taking those guys because they've already gone through that 3-4 year transition to what it means to play in the NFL. And they've proven themselves enough that they are as good or better than the ones we have. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I Dave on the rant there, but I think this is just my feeling, but I feel with the defensive line being a big position of need, and it's a very deep defensive line class, that the Vikings are going to invest in that early on and try to address that way more than in free agency.
And whereas that can impact better or more likely in the draft than O-linemen.
And you're right. And besides the guards that I've mentioned, Dave, like you said, like if depending on how free agency goes and who we target if we don't get Jenkins, if we aren't able to get Freeze, then the Vikings are going to have to go to the veterans, Zeitler, Will Hernandez, and Brandon Sheriff, who are in their 30s, and probably you're signing those guys to 1-year, 2-year deals. In Zeitler's case, he's 35. They've got a track record of being very good players, but when are they going to fall off the cliff? They're not long-term solutions to the Vikings' problems in the interior either. But like Stephon Gilmore, the Vikings might be forced to sign one of them as a short-term solution. But I think the Jenkins, Freeze, Daniels way is getting them younger and who could be here longer is the way to go. Now, depth-wise, speaking of Ingram, like you read about how the Vikings likely are going to release him. I wonder about that because they only get significant cap relief if it's a post June 1st release, which isn't going to help them in free agency now. And Ingram's cap hit will be $3.7 million, kind of high for a backup, but is it outrageously high? Also, he started for 2.5 years, and you and Tyler thought that he wasn't nearly as bad as some other people did.
PFF does, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think he's going to be back, and
he's under contract. Same with Bradbury. Same with Brandel.
He's under contract. He's been a starter in the league before, not a great one, but he's had his moments. And I think as in case one of your guards that is starting does get injured, you got a former starter that had quite a bit of upside, and you picked in the second round that you can put in there to be as a short-term solution to an injury. So that's why I think Ingram will be back. Michael Juergens and Walter Rouse, the rookies from last year, they'll certainly be back as depth guys. I'm really hoping that they have that year of developmental that they had last year. Like Rouse, I think he dressed for one game. Juergens dressed for almost all of them, but never played an offensive snap, I think. So they were redshirt guys. But that year of development, I'm really hoping, and hope is not a plan, I always say, that year has that they've taken a big step in their development, and that they can serve as quality depth and guys that you can trust to play NFL snaps if somebody, those starters, goes down, and perform solidly, and not be a big
hindrance, not a huge
hindrance to you. Juergens is saying he can play guard, he can play center, so he's got positional flexibility. Rouse, is he your swing tackle this year, Dave? It kind of sounded like Ryan Grigson was talking to Paul Allen at the Combine too, and he brought up both Juergens and Rouse, and he had a lot of good things to say about them, about how tough they are, about how smart they are, about and how they were overlooked in the draft, he felt, and that the Vikings got some bargains there. But he also did talk about Rouse's positional flexibility too. I get the feeling that the Vikings are thinking about Rouse moving him inside to guard, and that he won't be strictly a tackle. So I don't know if he's your swing tackle yet. The guy who was last year, David Quesenberry, is also a free agent. He is also going to be 35 next year. He's been okay. He's been solid enough when pressed into action. I'm not convinced the Vikings are going to bring him back because of his age, but when you look at the free agent landscape, Dave, and guys like Quesenberry, a swing tackle has got to be, like Quesenberry, has got to be, I think, at a certain age, and got to be accepting of the fact that he might not play at all, right, and he's not going to get paid a lot of money. Those guys are usually like Quesenberry, not great players, not promising, but with experience and cheap. So Quesenberry could be back. I don't know if he's going to continue to play football. He hasn't announced his retirement yet, but he's been with the Vikings.
Carter connection. It's going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes. He has been with the Vikings. The Vikings have been comfortable with him as a swing tackle for 2 years. If Rouse isn't ready, and I would hope that he is, then I could see Quesenberry coming back. But I feel that's very much a flip of the coin kind of decision now. And there's other guys on the free agent market, veterans who are low priced and give you a certain mid-tier level of play. Maybe Dan Skipper from the Lions, free agent. The Vikings know him well. They've been watching him catch touchdown passes and and run routes and play in heavy packages for the Lions for 3 years now. Is he a guy that they would be comfortable with? He's a huge human being. He'd be somebody I'd keep an eye on. The Vikings probably also, I don't see Dan Feeney coming back. They barely dressed him last year, but they will need somebody like him who will also, like Juergens, can play. Can he play right guard? Can he play center? Can he play left guard? And in those cases, I think, just like when Cooper became the Vikings offensive line coach, and he brought Austin Slotman with him for 2 years because who played under him. I think you got to look at these reserve guys. You got to look at, again, player, coach, who has played under a guy and who's at that stage of the career where they be willing to come aboard for minimal money and potentially minimal playing time. And a couple that came to mind was Elijah Wilkinson in here. Didn't play very much at all, barely at all last year with the Cardinals, but he has played a fair amount in Denver under Cooper in previous 2019, 2020. He's a guy I'd keep an eye on as being a Dan Feeney kind of signing. And another guy, if he doesn't hate Carter's guts, would be Jake Hansen from the Jets last year. Another guy, he only played, I think, 9.4% of the offensive snaps, but he can play center. He can play guard. He has played significant amount of snaps in games in the NFL in previous years with the Packers and then with the Jets. Again, another guy, he's not going to cost much. He's not old either, but he's a guy who I think understands where he's at in the NFL. He's considered a backup right now that has played in the past. Another guy to keep an eye on as a reserve depth guy for the offensive line that we might add because he's got a past relationship with our current assistant offensive line coach.
I agree wholeheartedly. Got to fix the interior. That's the project. for the offseason. It's going to be interesting to see how the Vikings organization does it. Do they fix it via free agency? And then we only have 4 draft picks, but do one of the 4 draft picks make for either part of the fix or an attempt at part of the fix or just depth? And then we also want to watch some of the UDFAs that fall through. If they come up, do they have the ability to develop, given 3 or 4 years behind, just like we have Walter Rouse or Michael Juergens? Those are developmental guys. Are they going to take the next step? And then are we keep replenishing those? That's going to be an interesting thing. Rouse, I look forward to seeing this summer, spring, or fall in training camp, because he's got nothing but glowing reviews from guys in the press that say, wow, he's doing great. And he didn't obviously become a starter nor make the active roster most of the time. But can he make that next step with having a full off season is the question mark. It's going to be interesting, but they've got to focus on the trenches, as George says. And I think they will. Now, speaking of trenches, next week we'll get into the entire defense because we want to hit it before the free agency starts. But trenches is a big, big part of that. And we're going to hit that. So just to let you know.
Well, and the commenters have already let us know that they're interested in the trenches, because there's lots of comments about defensive line, offensive tackle in there, even though we've been talking about the offensive line.
So, any last words there, buddy?
Just exciting times, Dave. This is always an exciting time of year, but so much things are going to ramp up so much in the next 7 to 10 days. Our head's going to be swimming on all the rumors and also the moves that are going to be made. We're going to have a lot to discuss. Sometimes on this show in the off season, Dave, I'm like thinking, geez, what are we going to talk about? Well, that hasn't been a problem this week, and it won't be a problem for the next 2 weeks either.
No, it won't. It will not. We're going to find out. Skywalker McCarthy, who I think I know who it is, if Rouse can take that Oli Udoh step and play guard without holding, that would be great. And I agree with you 100%, buddy. 100%. I want to thank everybody that joined us today. You guys have rocked and sticking with us for an hour and a half show. I appreciate it. And what do we say, Darren?
We say, SKOL Vikings, baby, and thanks for watching.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!